For
But if
sure.
you haven't heard of it, Summer of Soul is now streaming on Hulu and in theaters. It is directed by Amir Thompson, also known as Questlove, a member of the hip hop group The Roots. Essentially, what this movie revolves around is a documentary on the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival. Have you not heard of the Harlem Cultural Festival? Not many people have, disappointingly so. That's why this documentary, one of the many reasons it's so important. It's essentially the Black Woodstock. It's referred to that several times because you think about 1969, the pivotal year that it was, and we'll dive into that probably later on. And it was the same year as Woodstock, but it got none of the media coverage. But this was a massive summer-long concert event that had some 300,000 people attending over the duration of time, mostly, if not all, African Americans. I think one of the wilder stories to emerge out of this is that the Harlem police, would not patrol this and have security. So they were enlisted in Black Panthers to secure this thing.
I was just about to say
stranger than fiction.
This could not be and I mean this lovingly, this could not be like a blacker festival. You know what I mean? Just in the roster,
seriously,
the security were Black Panthers, BB King, Nina Simone, Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder were all there, and this is just a sea of proud Black people just living up this music, and we never heard of it. I have never heard of it. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people attended this thing, and of course they probably talked about it, but no one in the media that I've ever recognized. Because Steve, tell me, in your history books, was there mention of Woodstock in the 60s portion?
Sure.
Yeah,
sure, because it fit right in. It fit right in then. The story of Woodstock fit right in. And it's funny because I'm reading Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which takes place around the same time. It fits in right with the hippie countercultural movement. And it's almost like you cannot tell the story of the 60s, of Vietnam, of civil rights without mentioning Woodstock because it's so inextricably linked with the free love and hippie movement of the time. It's wound itself and weaved itself into the annex of history in that regard, and the Harlem Cultural Festival, by all accounts too, it was filmed. Obviously it was filmed, and outside of a local New York TV station, it was never broadcast. Nobody had any interest in doing anything with this footage. It sat in a basement. What basement? I don't know. They keep referencing this basement, but they never tell you what basement.
That's what I was hoping to find out. It's like, God.
This thing, they don't tell you what basement, and it kind of pisses me off. But like the footage sat in a basement for 5 decades completely unused. And I just got to say, first off, with this movie, it's not super hard to see if you're going to like this movie, but I'm going to say this. If names like The Fifth Dimension, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Stevie Wonder, Nina Simone, Mahalia Jackson, BB King, Stevie Wonder, if these names don't excite you, I don't think we could be friends, because this is capital M music right here. This is capital M music.
It really, to call it first of all, to call it the Black Woodstock is actually kind of accurate, just because it's not just a random collection of Black artists who happened to be doing it at the same time as Woodstock. No, these were the artists. These were pivotal artists of their time and for the decades to come. Like Stevie Wonder was, I mean, by then he was already well established, but they go into it how he takes his career would take on so many transformations after this, and we really are seeing like the first 1 or 2 phases of it. And so many others who would go on in the 70s and 80s. And it's like, this is quintessential. Like it's so weird that like we celebrate Motown so much, and rightfully so, but this never got mentioned. No one outside of the Black community really heard of this thing. Many members of the Black community, from what I've seen online, haven't heard of this thing. And I don't know, man. It's astounding, and but it's also like not good to call it Black Woodstock because it took place before Woodstock.
It predated Woodstock. That was the even crazier thing.
Before and after.
Yeah,
it just kept going.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, you really feel the gravity of this thing because it opens and kind of closes with like people recounting. I really enjoyed the scenes when you had like Marilyn McCoo from The Fifth Dimension, right, and other surviving members of these bands watching this footage again because they hadn't seen it. They hadn't seen it since it happened.
Oh, that's
and
right.
then you get like these festival goers too that were there, and a lot of them young kids who remember it, like, you know, the biggest block party. I think one person refers to it as like, you know, one big cookout, you know, one big cookout, which is what it was. And you get the sense too, because the one man who attended it even says too, he's like, I've told stories about this thing, but I have no evidence of it. He's like, people think I'm crazy. I feel like I was starting to think I'm crazy because it just, you don't have any, you know, like artifacts from it. It's not something that's commonly known. You really had to be there. And it makes you wonder how many other events, there can't be very many, but there have to be several. How many other events were these massive ostensible turning points in the country, at least for a specific demographic, a specific subset of people, that you never hear about? And I think that's the shot. Like, that's the thing that Summer of Soul makes you wonder. And it's kind of paradoxical because you won't know unless they're brought to your attention. But it's something to consider, because if this gigantic thing could get lost to the recesses of history, what the hell else is out there demanding a documentary and preventing it from erasure?
300,000 people attended this thing over the course of its run, and we still never heard about it. It took place literally in the biggest city in the U.S., and we didn't hear about this thing. Meanwhile, at some other random field, all these rock things were going on. And, you know, I don't want to bash Woodstock too much. Woodstock's still pretty damn awesome. But yeah, just the fact that, you know, we didn't give this its proper due. And if, you know, if there was a flood and all the footage was lost to a flood, or the building demolished or whatever, or if Questlove just never came around to it, it might as well have never happened, right? And it's astounding that when people say we need to, particularly when we talk about Black issues, right? Not that we can talk about it too much representatively, but when people talk about, you know, remembering Black stories, remembering women's stories, remembering Asian, all stories and all this history, this is what we're talking about. Because watching this thing, it, like, in addition to the incredible directing and cinematography and the feel of it all, just seeing all the footage and just seeing all these figures, this amazing thing, and like proving to the world that it actually did happen. It gave me this raw sense of jubilance, but also like this low level of like anger, you know, where it's like, what the hell were we doing not talking about this so much? And it's just so, in the political context of it all, with Jesse Jackson being featured heavily in this documentary, is just you sit back and you think about it, you know, all this history from hundreds of years ago, where, you know, talking slaves or veterans or all these, you know, war stories and whatnot, you know, that seems so long ago. 1969, the farther we get from it, at the same time, it feels younger. It gets younger. And this documentary has absolutely made that time period so young and so timeless and so beautiful at the same time. I don't know, man.
If you want to talk about a pivotal year, I mean, we just went through one that felt like a whole ass decade, you know, and I think we're still feeling the repercussions of it. But when it comes to Summer of Soul, just like the politics and the music are so inextricably linked, and as the movie goes on, they become inextricably linked, especially with that Nina Simone finale of the documentary too. We'll touch on that in a bit, but the context here is just as important as the actual event. Obviously, you had Woodstock that it would happen the same year and get all the media coverage, but you had John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X. They'd been dead for years, but they remained in the collective minds of a country as well. You had Martin Luther King Jr., who was killed not even a year prior to this thing. And also, don't forget, the United States found its way to the damn moon that year. Like, yeah. And the crazy thing is, too, one of the best scenes in this thing is when, like, the documentary juxtaposes the footage of like the moon landing with the festival in a way. And like, you see the reaction, like the Black community don't care. And like, this is their history being made at Mount Morris Park in Harlem. The moon landing don't mean jack. I mean, quite honestly, the moon landing didn't mean really much for any, one individual, common person, especially not the Black community, which felt disproportionately and still feels disproportionately represented and treated. So like that juxtaposition in the movie is very telling. And that's one of my favorite things about the movie, is the way it shows that.
It's funny. They actually managed to find probably the most eloquent speaking person in the audience there talk about the moon landing, and it's like, yeah, no, it's cool for science. I'm going to be honest with you, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, all that money, and we're still poor as shit over here in Harlem. Are you kidding me?
Seriously.
What? And you know what? And again, the fact that this footage could not be sold, or these broadcast rights could not be sold, no one wanted to pick it up. It sat in the basement for years. No one wanted to even bother remembering about it until Questlove or whoever came along. It's like, dude, they were vindicated in those feelings by the simple fact that it took a documentary in 2021 to come out for people to remember this damn thing.